I've been following this series of yours, ongoing, never-ending saga about trying to get a firearm in D.C.
It is dragging on a lot longer than any of us expected.
I mean, what's it now been, several months we're talking about?
Yeah, it's been 3.
You see what's going on, though, and see what you're going through. You have to know how many residents are out there who have been just fed up with it, and they've given up.
Oh, and it's so telling. And first of all, anecdotally, people come up to me all the time and either say, one, I have unregistered guns, so law-abiding citizens normally, unregistered guns, I just didn't want to go through this process. So there are so many illegal guns in this city because of this process. And number 2 is only 250 new guns are registered every year. Out of a city of, like 700,000? I mean, that's just so telling because the process is so ridiculous. And you basically have to quit your job and make a lot of extra money at the same time in order to get a gun in this city.
And that's exactly what they wanted to do, frustrate people so they don't get a gun. But as you found out, if you want to own a firearm and get a permit, you have to go out of state to get it. Whether it's finding a certified instructor, you got to go out of state. To buy a gun, you got to go out of state.
Oh, that's, Jenny, you hit on what I have found to be the most egregious point of all of the rules and the 22-page packet that D.C. makes you memorize, is that they require this 5-hour safety course, quote-unquote safety course, 4 hours in a classroom, 1 hour at a range. And basically the 4 hours in the classroom is memorizing the packet that they gave you, which you could do yourself, and 1 hour at the range just to make sure you can actually hit the paper. That's it. And even if you're registering a shotgun, you have to show that you can handle a handgun, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, obviously. But these classes are not allowed to be taught in the city because there's no gun ranges here. And so in order to fulfill my right to own a gun in D.C., the city requires that I leave and go to Virginia or Maryland or another state that teaches these classes in order to take the class to get my gun. And I'll tell you, I'm lucky. I have a car. Probably most D.C. residents do not. None of these instructors teach on a metro line or easily accessible by bus. I mean, it's 5 hours. You're going to have to find a way to get there if you can. Most of them are in really small towns and really far from the city. I mean, it is one of the biggest obstacles. I really don't know how easily it can be done for those people who don't have cars in the city, as well as the money. The class I took cost $250. I called, D.C. gives you a list of 47 people who are supposedly qualified to teach this course. I called all 47 as part of my research for this project, only found 3 that were actively and could give it to me, the class right now. And of those, I've checked out rates. The cheapest I found is $130. Most expensive is $300. So they're charging an arm and a leg, I mean, sometimes maybe more than the gun at the end of this process to take this requirement. I mean, it's really unfair to the poor in Washington who maybe are in the least safe areas of town. And it's also very unfair for women who are forced to go to some stranger's house where these classes are taught.
And that's what really struck me. And bad enough you got to go do all this, but then they say, you have to go to these instructors who either, if they're still in business, they teach out of their homes, or as you said, in their basements. And so you're going to go to somebody you don't even know to learn about gun safety? Not real smart on the part of these D.C. officials.
And it's the D.C. police that are the ones who are forcing me to do this. When that first came up, this safety class issue, my editor's a man and has plenty of guns and lives in Virginia, and I kept postponing doing the safety class. And I kept saying, I don't want to go to this guy's house or this guy's house. And he couldn't understand it, and I said, you just can't understand this. You're not a woman, but I don't go to a stranger's house. So I called the police again, and I said, look, you've given me a list of names and phone numbers. That's it. No addresses, no verification. I mean, how am I supposed to feel safe doing this? And the officer said, after much hemming and hawing, well, we did do a criminal background check on all of them. I said, well, half of them aren't even teaching the class anymore or even have phone numbers that I can call, and the list hasn't been updated in 2.5 years. So how can I feel safe that you've really stayed on top of their criminal background checks to go into these people's homes? And like I said, one of the men who sounded very nice and was teaching the class somewhat close to D.C., I asked him where he taught it, and he said, in my house, in my basement, I have a whole room. And I just felt like I was going to be in a horror movie.
Yeah, I mean, and here we are talking about this months and months. And this is a constitutional right. The city council obviously doesn't see it this way. They continue to thumb their nose at the Supreme Court and its decision in Heller and McDonald. I mean, I think if the justices on the court saw this, if they read this, this is not what they intended in their decision.
Oh, I mean, I don't see how any court would look at the level of regulations and rules and hurdles I have to go through to get a gun and could say, this is constitutional. Mm-hmm. And, I have advantages. I'm a journalist. For my job, can take some days to do work on this, to get through this, this paperwork. The rest of the city can't. So, like your average citizen would definitely has to take days off work several times because you have to go down to the registry office at least twice. You have to take this safety class. I haven't even gone through it all yet, and spend hundreds of dollars to do it. It's just not fair, and it just can't. I don't see how it can be constitutional, especially the fact that you can't fulfill all the requirements within the city limits.
Absolutely, and I know we've talked with Charles Sykes, and he's the quote unquote only gun dealer in the district who can help you. And as you got to pay him what $125?
$125. I'm actually a pretty big defender of Charles Sykes. He's not getting rich off this. $125. He only 250 guns a year. He only works 4 hours a day. He's not making money. He's not getting rich off this, and it's just that no one else, there's no market, because it's so difficult. That's the thing is he would have competition if more people are registering their guns, but instead what D.C. residents are doing are getting illegal guns.
Yeah, and I'm not saying anything about Charles bad about him, because I remember when he was struggling to figure out where he was going to open up, and now he's in a city building, isn't he?
No, he's literally next to the DMV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where they've stuck him, which is fine. At least he has an office, and it's kind of convenient for people who are going to the registry office to also meet with Sykes in the same building. But, they tortured him, and it's only because the courts watching over their shoulder that the city made any kind of accommodation to give him an office at all.
Yeah, because I know there was a gun dealer here in Old Town who was thinking about opening up in D.C., but when you see what they've done, where you can't go and you can't set up here, they've made it impossible for anybody, and intentionally so, for anybody to try to open up a business.
No, this is what they told Sykes, that he had to move to offices. He had to find an office. And remember, he doesn't sell guns. He's just transferring them. He's just transferring. They told him he had to find a place in Washington, D.C. that was not a football field's length from any of these things: a church, a library, a school, a house, or an apartment building or a government building.
Yeah.
A football field in this tightly packed city. It's obviously a joke.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's impossible. So then they put him out of business, and as I said, only because, again, luckily the courts are watching this situation. They gave him space next to the DMV, which is kind of funny. He's got signs outside saying for ticket payments, go to room 603, parking ticket payments. And this is our one gun dealer in Washington.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I'm sure you get tons of emails. Have you heard from residents who say, hey, you know what? I know what you're talking about because I'm dealing with the same thing?
Oh, well, I have to say, quite frankly, not that much.
Okay.
I have had some, but really not a lot of people in D.C. try to register guns because they know anecdotally that it's very difficult, number one. And number two is because it's expensive and because it's difficult, from what I've heard, people are just getting them illegally and not registering them. So the people who have started, a couple of women have approached me and said they have the exact same fears with the safety class, and that was a real barrier for them. But I have one friend who went through the registration process this summer. He's a CEO of a major company and had to take 3 full days off work to finalize it. Think about the cost benefits of that,
Yeah.
And he moved into the city. He wasn't even registering new guns, so eliminated that whole process of transferring the guns. He was just trying to register these guns. So, I think if the city at some point, opened up and said, we will let anyone register their guns for one day, come in and sign this form, and you're not going to get penalized, I think thousands and thousands and thousands of guns would suddenly show up in the city.
Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting, but
it's a shadow.
You say you have 13 more steps to go through. So when do you think you're actually going to get your gun?
I don't know. I don't know. At this point, my goal is, I think my initial goal was to find a way to go through the system as the most complicated way, which I'm going to go through every step and not do any research and really figure it out and then put a guide out for people to know how to do it quicker and easily. But now I'm hoping, as the city council has started to look at some of these laws, that maybe they'll consider eliminating some of the steps. So I think the more that I get into the weeds with this process and make sure I know every single one of their requirements, then I can help point out these things, and the city council maybe will eliminate some of them.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but have you been able to talk with any of the city council members? Have they contacted you since you? I know the answer.
Well, they're not fans of mine, really. But City Councilman Mendelson came out with this bill, surprised me very much. Actually, the Washington Post, of all places, even though I work for the Washington Times, called it the Emily Miller bill. Phil Mendelson is a Democrat. Came out with this bill proposing some changes just 3 weeks ago, proposing some changes to eliminating some of these rules to getting to registration. So I think that's why I said I think, there really is a window here to make a change and to really get some of the stuff off the books. Before, like you said, it has to get up to the Supreme Court to make that decision.